Hello, everyone. Heather Prekop here, Global Director for CPG, and here from Euromonitor, together with Spiros, our lead analyst from alcohol industry, and Matt Berry, who had joined me at CAGNY last week, leading food and beverage insights for the North America region. And we're here today, obviously, from alcohol space. We heard from Molson Coors and Diageo last week, and so really just looking to Spiros again out of our Europe office looking for his take on what we heard from alcohol. And so, Matt, I guess if you want to kind of take lead.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. All right, Spiros. So two big companies obviously got up there, talked about a lot of things. What was your biggest takeaway from what Molson and Diageo said?
I think there is a couple of things that we can learn. Sometimes they were obvious, sometimes they were behind the words, semantics, or reference points that were mentioned during the presentations. I would highlight the interplay between in the question: is the slowdown and the headwinds faced by the alcohol industry right now, are they cyclical or structural? The fate of the mantra for the alcohol industry for the last couple of decades, which is obviously the mantra of drinking less but better, or otherwise known as premiumization, and the totemic nature of the focus that Molson Coors gave to Coors Banquet, and what does this brand mean? What does it encapsulate? What can it tell us, both for the company strategy, but also for the American psyche and the way the American consumer and drinker behaves these days?
Let's go into that. I mean, we talked about premiumization, but Banquet, it's not a very premium brand. So how do we square those two things, a Molson Coors emphasis on premiumization with the fact that Banquet's one of their top performers?
I think that is why I found it so interesting. First of all, let's take a step back then. And let's start with this premiumization debate that is obviously raging in the last couple of years, but it has been a mainstay in my analysis and in many of the conversations I've had with the industry over the last 20 years, as I said, to the extent that most people in the industry right now can, it's almost a parallel to equity analysts just before the 2007 crash. They were just not alive during a time that a crash had ever happened. So people cannot even imagine a time outside of the premiumization narrative. That is obviously problematic, and that is my concern when it comes to that. I think we have begun to see anecdotal evidence and the first signs of, if not a wholesale retreat from premiumization, at least in my mind, a shift towards the new era of polarization. And polarization, by its own nature, incorporates elements of moving more premium for certain socioeconomic strata, certain occasions, certain demographics. So by any means, I'm not saying that this is the end of premiumization. No one should start drinking early in the afternoon by hearing me saying something like that. But at the same time, understand that there are limits and limitations and very severe pressures on that side of the equation. And while this is happening, while premiumization for certain parts of society and for certain parts of demographics retains its relevance, I think there's another side of consumers that are increasingly looking to economize, or at the very least, if not entirely trade down, at the very least, trade across. Trade across could be from whiskey or a premium whiskey to a premium rum. It could be trading across in different beer segments. But these macroeconomic pressures that have been with us in this time of perma crisis over the last 5 or 6 years, since 2019, they don't seem to go out of the picture. And I expect them to continue in the context, obviously, of the ongoing potential trade wars, the addition of tariffs, and this kind of geopolitical volatility that obviously has an impact on consumer confidence levels. That, of course, then that feeds into the way people are spending their money on drinks. Now, that kind of very briefly summarizes the situation when it comes to the interplay within the premiumization debate. But at the same time, I think that's why I found the Coors Banquet to be an extremely interesting example, potentially encapsulating all of the things that we are mentioning now, is the fact that this is a brand that has become iconic on the back of embracing all things Americana, this kind of retro forwards, tradition embracing, frontier imagination based kind of marketing campaigns. But at the same time, and I think that's where it becomes extremely interesting, it highlights and always has highlighted its affordability credentials. This is not a premium brand and has never claimed to be that. And it is actually moving on the opposite direction of most of the other brands out there by doing extremely well in an environment that is becoming increasingly pressurized and difficult and challenging for most of the major beer brands. So a combination of nostalgia that is, as we all know, relevant in times of socioeconomic crisis, so embracing the crisis in terms of positioning, but at the same time, embracing the crisis as an opportunity in terms of affordability credentials and price point. I think that goes against the grain of what many of the presentations were suggesting, but it also highlights and underscores my point about the time of the monolithic and monodimensional focus on this one-way road down premiumization is most likely behind us, and we need to think on many different levels and in a much more diversified perspective for these times that will continue needing a drink, but in a different context and in a different mindset.
It's interesting in that regard is that
it.
the beauty companies were saying very similar things that what you're saying now, especially Coty. The growth is on the prestige side, and then the masstige side. So that middle's getting squeezed, but they admitted, the growth is on these two ends, which seems like they're willing to say, but the alcohol companies aren't really there yet.
I think that's where I started with the point that sometimes when you are in an industry for too long and you have embraced the trend for too long, it's difficult to see outside the box. You just think within that box. I think the example of the success of Molson Coor with Coors Banquets, the first signs of clear depremiumization in the all-important and ubiquitous now tequila segment, the first whispers of some of the economy segments or even private label iterations gaining ground in the last few months, the rise of the, by definition, more affordable RTD segment that, can, by definition, single serve, much more casual positioning rather than buying a super premium tequila bottle. All of these are signs pointing to that direction. So I'm guessing that the industry will have to wake up to these facts very soon as well and catch up to the state that the BBC industry potentially already is. But it might take a little bit longer. Potentially this year and next will be transformative if the socioeconomic, macroeconomic, and geopolitical pressures continue being so strong. Then if the alcohol industry doesn't change on their own, they will be forced to change by the circumstances and the environment.
So you think then they're going to be more pragmatic in the future, maybe not by choice, but just by necessity?
I think they will. I think they are showing the expectations for mid to long-term growth are significantly lower than they used to be. I think they stopped talking about the word normalization from the COVID boom. That was the argument for the last couple of years, that the industry is not actually slowing down, but it is just a matter of realigning the distribution gains from the massive boom of sales during the COVID pandemic in the US specifically. I think they're past that stage now. They are the stage of acceptance. It's a few stages of grief sometimes. I think they're not calling it normalization anymore. It will take a bit longer, but they are definitely becoming more realistic, more pragmatic. And again, to highlight, this is not just to be grim and a doom-monger about the future of the industry. Opportunities, as they highlighted themselves, are still there. Many of the shortcomings and the issues and the challenges can and indeed will be turned into opportunities. For example, the debate about cannabis and its effect, the debate about it could also become an opportunity to the extent that the industry is entering the segment. The debate when it comes to GLP drugs and these kind of agents like Ozempic, what effect would they have? The adult non-alcoholic segment can have and is making huge gains, and Diageo, for example, is perfectly positioned for that. Gains can also be made in volumes and even in the economy segment. What I'm saying is not just to be translated as a doom and gloom approach, but as a much more pragmatic and realistic approach, understanding the reality out there, being aware of the dangers on the horizon, and being nimble and capable to navigate the choppy waters, aware that a storm is on the way.
Okay. Well, thank you, Spiros. I think you've given us quite a bit to think about today.
Right. Yeah. Thank you both, Matt, Spiros. I think the theme on value premium definitely relevant in the alcohol industry and food and beauty and beyond. And for your take on the future outlook, more pragmatic, if you will, for the alcohol industry. Thank you both.